You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, we are Enterprise-splaining, the podcast where we explain Star Trek Enterprise to each other and to you. I'm Maria, and these are my co-hosts, Jamie.
Hi.
And Bill.
Kapla.
And today's going to be a special episode where we look back on season 1, and we have a very special guest with us today, Sue. Sue, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background with Star Trek in general and with Enterprise in particular?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm one of the co-hosts of Women at Warp. Yeah, so we are closing in on 10 years of Women at Warp. So
Amazing.
That's ridiculous. Never saw that coming. I have been watching Star Trek since I was in the womb. I grew up fully with Next Gen. My first formed specific Star Trek memory is from the season premiere of TNG season 4, which is Best of Both Worlds Part 2. Mm-hmm. My older brother held a watch party in our living room and had printed out on our dot matrix printer a banner that said "Go Borg." And that is burned into my memory. Enterprise is actually kind of, I watched Next Gen as it aired. I watched DS9 and Voyager as they aired. Enterprise came on while I was in college, and my college had a no TV policy.
What?
So unless you lived off campus, at the time anyway, you could not have a television, and you could not bring your own, and you didn't have cable. And the only TVs were the communal ones, which I didn't have because I also lived in a brownstone on campus housing because Boston was a weird place.
Now, was it specifically to prevent the studentry from watching Star Trek Enterprise?
Possibly. So I was not watching Enterprise. It was the first Star Trek I wasn't watching as it aired. And I downloaded an episode from Kazaa at one point. Remember Kazaa?
Yeah, sure.
It was an episode you haven't gotten to yet, but is in the first half of season 2 called A Night in Sickbay. So I want you to remember that when you get there, that was the first episode of Star Trek Enterprise I watched. I have since seen every episode of it, probably most of them only once. Most of my rewatching has been podcast related.
Weirdly, that's what we hear from everyone.
Yeah. When you've had a steady diet of 80s and 90s Trek, Enterprises can be a little bit rough, I think. Yeah.
For sure. So overall, do you have a fondness for it, or is it sort of just it was Star Trek, it was fine? What's your kind of general feeling towards it?
I think of it as really being in two distinct parts. I think of the first 2 seasons as their own entity and seasons 3 and 4 as their own entity.
Interesting. Okay.
Which in a way, production-wise, there is a reason for. And I don't know if I want to spoil that or bring any biases into it when you get there.
Right.
But in season 3, it's no longer just Enterprise in the title credits. It's Star Trek Enterprise.
That I know because
and,
when we were 5 episodes into this podcast, I finally was like, you guys, what is the name of this show? I actually don't know.
Depends what season you're watching.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it was Star Trek Enterprise, and sometimes I would see it written as just Enterprise, and I did not know if when people called it Enterprise, they were just calling it that, but then that's also what it said in the show. We were way too far into this podcast before I realized I didn't know the name of the show the podcast was about.
Yeah, we don't know the name of the show either.
Turns out Jamie was watching the wrong show. She was watching Yellowstone. She kept talking about Kevin Costner and his cowboy hat.
But
yes.
In seasons 3 and 4, in all honesty, they, I think, go in some really interesting directions with storytelling, both in the way they tell their stories. They do sort of 3 and 4 episode arcs, so they're not going into full serialized storytelling, but they're starting to test it out. And they're also actually giving you some really good sci-fi. The gender and race dynamics don't get much better, but there's some interesting stories that happen. And I think if they had started doing those sort of stories earlier in the run, maybe there would have been 7 seasons of Enterprise. Who knows?
Horrifying thought.
I guess we got something to look forward to.
As I mentioned, today we are not going to be talking about a specific episode because, guys, we have reached the end of season 1. So it's time to do a little bit of reflection on the season.
Oh, boy.
And how this season of Enterprise and of our podcast is going. But before we do that, let's take a short break to hear from one of our sister podcasts on the ESO network.
Craving a caffeine fix and a dose of adventure?
Join us for the Have Coffee Will Travel podcast, where we sip, savor, and explore the world one cup at a time.
From discussing the latest coffee trends to diving into pop culture obsessions and sharing travel tips, we've got you covered.
So grab your favorite mug, hit play, and let's embark on a journey together.
Brewing up conversations about coffee, culture, and curiosity.
The Have Coffee Will Travel podcast.
Here we are at the end of season 1, and I want to get into our thoughts on the show. But before that, we have a little surprise. My husband, Stephen, who is also the voice of our computer, gave us some gifts to celebrate the end of the season, and we have no idea what is in here. So let's open these up.
It's going to be great audio here.
Yeah, I know, this is such good podcast.
I just want to say, he sent this 2 months ago.
Yeah, he
and
sent
I've
these
been
months
just
ago.
Staring at this for months,
Oh, dear.
wondering what was in it.
Oh, great. Just what I needed.
It is a model of the Enterprise, or little NX-01.
Aww.
One of my nacelles came off.
Did a nacelle fall off?
Trip! One of the nacelles fly up. We should probably get on a warp. Oh, really? Is that necessary?
Oh, that's so appropriate.
It is extremely
The
appropriate.
nacelle fell off.
Well,
Oh, my starfish. Okay, so yes, so this is a die-cast Enterprise NX-01. Thank you, Stephen. That is lovely, and I'm...
Thank you so much, Stephen. I love it.
what did you do? Bill's already broken his, but
That was the nacelle.
Drop the plastic stand that it came on.
Okay.
Sue, welcome to Enterprise Flater.
I love the Enterprise plating. We have no idea what we're doing.
This is why we record for 2 hours an episode.
Okay, guys, so overall, how are you feeling about this show at the end of season 1? That good, huh?
I feel like that answers it. I went back and I listened to the midpoint episode, and in that episode, I said that the show was both better than I thought it was going to be and worse than I thought it was going to be. And I kind of feel the same way since then, in that I feel like there are things that have gotten better and there are some things that have gotten worse. And the show feels so inconsistent, and the things that I didn't like, I now dislike even more, and the things that I liked, I like even more.
Yeah, I think in general, I don't think that I have enjoyed the storylines very much. I think there've just been a lot of very convoluted things, but I think that I'm starting to like some of the characters more than I did, certainly more than I did at the midpoint episode.
Oh, definitely.
And I'm certainly starting to, feel a little bit softer towards the crew in general.
This show it feels like frat boys in space.
It is. It is exactly that. Yes.
And at first I thought it was kind of not a mistake, but I don't know, growing pains. It was the first couple episodes and maybe they didn't really understand the characters or what they wanted to do. But now that we've made it through a whole season, it's clear that no, this is actually what they're trying to do.
Right.
This is what this show is.
Right. I definitely think that the writing of the show has gotten better, but you need to consider that that's in context of Terra Nova is the 3rd episode of this season. So that's a sliding scale.
I mean, you say that, but I'm the one who's gotten all the cave episodes and all
No,
the
you've gotten all the
stupid
terrible
political episodes. Consistently, I've gotten terrible episodes.
I'm just saying, even the bad what was the hunt episode? What was the slug episode?
Rogue Planet.
Rogue Planet was not great. It was miles better than Terra Nova is the worst episode.
Is Terra Nova Cocaine Cave?
No, Terra Nova is the weird
the one with the humans.
The humans with the bad, like they look like they escaped from a Duran Duran video.
Yeah.
If you're holding up Rogue Planet as a measure of goodness.
Exactly.
Better. I didn't say it was good. I said it was better.
Somewhat betterness? I don't know, man.
Rogue Planet is so heavy-handed. My God.
Yeah, but Archer did fall in love with a slug, which is very funny and kind of redeems the entire thing.
Yeah, so speaking of the midpoint episode, at our midpoint episode, our friend Charles was the guest, and he provided us with 2 truths and a lie about the second half of Enterprise. So how do you think we did? His 2 truths and a lie were, number 1, Trip Tucker seals a hull breach using mashed potatoes. Number 2, Trip Tucker nearly ruins first contact with the Bolians when he accidentally flirts with the ambassador's wife. And number 3, Trip Tucker eludes a band of Ferengi marauders in his underwear. And we all thought that was the lie, but in fact...
He really got us.
That shit
Because we were like, that doesn't make sense. There's no way that they meet Ferengis before Next Generation, and he really got us on that one.
One of the better episodes of this season.
I agree. Just despite there was some weird stuff in that episode, and yet even...
The devil, you say.
Oh, you mean in spite the human trafficking?
You'll see more of that, by the way.
And the literal pile of women, and yet somehow we're like, that was one of the better episodes of the season. Really tells you something about the whole season.
To damn Enterprise with faint praise, it was not pro-human trafficking. At least they avoided that landmine.
Great point. Jesus Christ.
They came out firmly anti-human trafficking.
So I think this is a good segue into, from this season, what was your favorite episode and which one did you hate the most? Sounds like, Bill, yours is Terra Nova in the hate the most.
I think it's the worst episode. I'm gonna actually I want to roundtable this and see if somebody spikes something, because Terra Nova is just a big pile of nothing, and I'm not sure if it inspires hatred in me. It's just it was boring.
It was like, I would say it's the most boring episode of the whole season.
It was like staring at a refrigerator for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I think the ones that I disliked the most were the ones, actually the last couple I've done, which are the 9/11 episode, in spite of having Dean Stockwell in it, who I adore and thoroughly enjoyed. It was very heavy-handed, as was the next one. The next one I did, which was Desert Crossing. Yeah.
The one with the space lacrosse.
Yeah, the one with space lacrosse. Again, which had Archer and Trip without shirts on playing slow motion space lacrosse, and I still hated it.
So I hated Fusion so much. I still get angry about it when I think about it.
Which one was Fusion?
Fusion was the T'Pol mind rape episode.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, that one makes me angry. That one, I would, yeah.
Like, it's the one that I feel like actively angry about. And Archer was so awful in it. Like, the way that he forced T'Pol to hang out with that creepy Vulcan guy, even though she told him he was dangerous and that she felt uncomfortable. And he's just like pushed her into it. And then at the end, he still got to be the hero. It represents everything I hate about this show. Like, the writers don't even realize how horrible Archer is in the episode.
That's the thing. That's the thing about a lot of the problems with Enterprise, is that because of the makeup of the writer's room, they don't even realize how disgusting and problematic and terrible certain things are. And I will also tell you that Fusion is one of the very few season 1 episodes that gets a follow-up later on. And if you hated Fusion, just you wait.
Do I hate Fusion more or Terra Nova more? That's a real would you rather situation. That's a either scab sandwich or wear a coat made of boogers.
I mean, Fusion at least makes me feel things. It's angry things. And it did some things really well. Like, I do feel like Jolene Blaylock's acting in that episode was so good.
Archer does have a very brief moment of good allyship, but it's
Yeah.
brief.
Very
At the
brief.
end. But then he doesn't realize what he
Yeah.
did up to that point.
Mhm.
At least it wasn't boring. Like Terra Nova was boring, but I still I hated Fusion. I hated it.
And okay, so on the other side, which episodes did you like? There were a handful of episodes here where I thought, oh, well, this finally feels sort of like Star Trek. I think that Dear Doctor was one of those.
Yeah.
I feel like it asked some of the questions that sort of Star Trek tends to do well on. And I enjoyed Acquisition. I enjoyed the Ferengi episode. I thought it was a fun romp as you said, in spite of the human trafficking.
I loved the episode Oasis, the one with Renee Auberjonois. I just thought it had everything I love about Star Trek. Like, it had some big ideas, like what does it mean to create a home and a family, or realizing like that the people that you love might need something different than what you want or can give them. It also had a fun mystery and a satisfying conclusion that made sense. It had fun light elements with the like romantic comedic stuff. It was just a good episode of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Renee Auberjonois was so good in it. It's too bad he's not in this show.
He had better things to do, let's be honest.
Well, technically, Odo could be in any scene of Star Trek Enterprise.
It's true.
Sorry, that took me a second.
Is Dear Doctor the one?
It's the one where they commit genocide.
It's the day in the life of Phlox.
It's one of the 2 episodes of the season where they commit genocide.
Yeah, okay. So it's the one where he realizes that like the people he's helping are okay with the other kinds of people on the planet dying. Yes, that's a good episode.
Yeah, that was
Good
a very
episode.
good episode. I just had a lot of fun with it, and it made me really like Phlox.
Yeah, and I think, sort of talking about like what I was saying earlier in terms of characters that I really disliked or have grown to like. Phlox is one of them. Trip is probably the biggest one for me. Like, I am amazed at how much I like Trip now compared to how much I disliked him.
Oh, I
to
have
begin
thoughts on
with.
Trip. Don't worry about that. We're going to talk about Trip.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So you asked me what my favorite episode is. I will not say this is the best episode. It is definitely my favorite episode. It is Unexpected.
Yes.
It is. Can you show me one episode that describes Star Trek Enterprise Season 1 in a nutshell? This is the episode I'm going to show you because it is so damn goofy. The science in it is absolutely awful. Like, they have to create Jello cube water because they don't know what water is.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. I love these aliens who have never seen water.
Trip is off his ass, tripping balls the entire episode, and then he gets pregnant, which is just the chef's kiss.
By sticking his hand in a bowl of rocks.
And then the Klingons show up. It is an amazingly goofy episode. The writing is straight out of the 1950s, and I like that it stubbornly refuses to engage with any of the implications of a man being unwittingly impregnated by an alien. That doesn't matter. We're just going to make jokes about this.
Yeah, like a terrifying situation where he has been implanted with an embryo. But the thing he's most worried about is how will he continue to work once he has a baby? Which also in the utopian future is apparently a problem.
It is an amazingly silly episode, and it is also the first episode where I realized that Trip and T'Pol are definitely fucking, because she lights into him. She is just doing a straight up roast of him.
Yeah, and Sue, to be clear, what Bill is saying is not that they will in the future.
No, I understand.
They had cabinet that they have been this whole time
From day one.
in a secret relationship.
And this is my favorite, bar none, my favorite part of Enterprise in particular is just T'Pol just roasting anybody. Maybe not Hoshi so much, but...
Yeah, unless it's Hoshi.
Well, she doesn't actually roast Hoshi. Hoshi just thinks she's being roasted.
In order to roast Hoshi, she'd have to speak to Hoshi. Like, then they don't
She
speak to
does
each other.
speak to Hoshi when she's saying something mean to her.
But anytime Trip and T'Pol get to interact on a personal level, it is just chef's kiss. It's just a perfect... I love the energy between them. So Unexpected is my pick for favorite episode of season 1.
Nice. overall, what do you guys think about the how the tone of the show is evolving? Like, how are they handling like the comedy side of it, the drama, day-to-day relationships? I mean, for me, I think they're getting better at the comedy as we get to know these characters a little more. But I still think they're really struggling with kind of these day-to-day relationships between the crew.
Yeah, they do a lot of like light banter between characters, except often it's inappropriate. They're doing light banter in inappropriate ways or inappropriate situations. Just thinking about like the finale when they're talking about going down to this like matriarchal planet and they're like making jokes about it, and Trip is like, I guess that means I shouldn't be like flirtatious, and it's like, no, actually you shouldn't be flirtatious in first contact situations in general anyways. Like,
or in general, like this is your job.
Yeah.
While at work, bad idea.
And sort of going back to what you were saying about unexpected, like they seem to handle things that could be very interesting and deep and important with just comedy. Like, we're not gonna handle this at all.
Which would be fine if that was the tone of the show. Like, Strange New Worlds, a show I love,
Yeah.
is goofy as fuck for the most part. Like 70% of that show is goofy as hell, and then 30% is like super grim dark. But I feel like Strange New Worlds owns that goofiness better. Like,
If I may, it's intentional on Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not intentional on Enterprise. Like they thought they were making a very serious show, very serious science fiction show that occasionally had some one-liner jokes in it, but they were making a goofy show full of frat boys.
I want to throw something out here. They thought they were making a 2000s version of a Captain Kirk show. Like, what was their impression of what the original series was like, which isn't what it was like.
Yeah, it's not what it was like. It's what the culture has absorbed.
Right.
Right? Like, culture who aren't Star Trek fans think that Kirk is a womanizer. In fact, Kirk is actually quite good, and it's Spock who is the problematic one.
Ooh, hot take. I like this a lot. Let's talk about this for a while.
I mean, just watch the episodes. It's Spock who's always saying, women are illogical. Why would you listen to them? And it's Spock or Kirk who is defending the women on his ship and saying, treat them like any other crewman. What are you talking about?
I think that that's a great point, Sue, and I think that intentionality is a big part of that. I think those conversations happened in the original series because they wanted to talk about those conversations. Like, they wanted to show that this is what the culture says, and here's how we should be. This is how we should be responding. Whereas I feel like here with Enterprise, as you said, it's much more of a caricature of what somebody, and that all makes sense based on what we know about season 1 and the writing staff, who much of the writing staff had never written for Star Trek, and so they were working off of what has sort of soaked into the cultural consciousness, which isn't necessarily true.
And that was intentional too. I mean, if we go back to the early development of this with Berman and Braga, right? They never said it in the exact words, but they were trying to distance this show from Star Trek. What they said, their exact words were that they wanted to make it accessible to new fans. What they wanted to do was distance themselves. That's why it was called Enterprise, not Star Trek Enterprise. That's why the theme song had lyrics. That's why they went closer to our time, right? This is the closest we've ever been to our current time. This is why they're in jumpsuits and sneakers. This is why the show is so damn American.
That's why they were like, what if we had less diversity?
Right. 90% of the cast is American, right? And it is the excuse behind all of this was to make it more accessible, to distance from the franchise because they thought there was franchise fatigue. And that was actually a question I had for all of you of whether you thought any part of that was successful. I'm going to guess the answer is no.
I mean, as we're talking about it, the things that we love most about the show are the things that feel most like Star Trek. And I think it's interesting in 2024 because I think a lot of the newer shows feel very different than a lot of these original or earlier Trek shows. And yet they still feel like Star Trek.
We've talked about this before, but I understand the desire to get away from the utopian ideal of Next Generation. Like DS9, okay, they're going to make messy choices. They are out on the frontier. Voyager, they're literally away from stuff like that. I don't know what this show is trying to do.
I think what they wanted to do was, and I think, there was a lot of like, this is not your father's Star Trek, right? They wanted to be this sort of young, hip, young people going out, exploring the universe. What would it really be like? And closer to our time frame and all of that. And I think to some degree they succeeded in that.
Yeah, I do feel like the show has like a wild, wild west feel. Like I like that they're out there exploring and they're kind of the underdogs. Like they're meeting people who've never heard of humans. They don't have the Federation behind them to be able to like throw their weight around the way they do on like Next Generation and DS9. And I do feel like it's successful in that.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that they fuck up. Right? Because that is to be expected the first time humanity goes out into space. However, the way they handle those fuck ups is extremely problematic to me. They never think they're wrong. The handful of times that they question whether what they're doing is right, somebody else says, no, you're absolutely right in what you're thinking. They never learn. To me, that's the whole point of Star Trek is here's a bunch of humans in a weird ass situation and maybe they don't get it all right, but they learn something and, are better next time around. And that just isn't happening here. They just keep making the same mistakes.
No, there's absolutely there's never any consequences for anything that they do.
In the first Andorian episode, then later when there were consequences, the consequences were on T'Pol.
Right.
Like she's the one who got blamed for
never
it.
having consequences isn't even the biggest issue because you can't tell me that James Kirk ever had a real consequence. Never. The issue.
Excuse me, he was demoted from admiral to captain of a starship. Can you
Which is
imagine
exactly
the shame
what
that
he
man
wanted.
that man had to bear?
The issue isn't even the consequences. It's that they're never once humbled. They come out of any conflict with more arrogance somehow.
And this is the weird part. This is a larger discussion about the show, is that Archer is always right and everyone always supports him. And that's the weird fucking part because on Quantum Leap, Scott Bakula played an empathy machine. Every episode was about him learning a different perspective. It's like, oh, now I'm going to be a disabled veteran. Now I'm going to be a black woman in the Deep South. Now it's just this weird fucking disconnect for this actor.
I think that's what makes me angriest about the show is it's making me dislike Scott Bakula, who I adore. I think he was his character was so great in Quantum Leap that it's really hard to see this very kind of, hard-nosed, doesn't really care about anybody except what he's trying to accomplish and his perspective, right? And that is really, really hard. Because if you had put Sam Beckett into this situation, it'd be a fucking fantastic show.
I wouldn't even describe him as hard-nosed. I would describe him as oblivious. It's this constantly wandering into a situation like, why doesn't everybody love me? Like, I'm obviously doing the right thing. And
I do think it's interesting because there have been now a couple of episodes where he's had to deal with the consequences of his actions, right? So the Desert Crossing episode where him rescuing the Suliban from that encampment has meant that he is rumor has it he is this great fighter and warrior.
Now everyone wants him to come help them out, and he's like, I actually don't like helping people.
Yeah, and he's like, whoa. But
I helped one person. I'm not helping more people.
But again, he figures that out, but then nothing happened. He doesn't ever come out of that going, I gotta be really smarter about how I handle this in the future,
So I I have a thought on Archer. Who here has watched any episode of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century with Gil Gerard?
No.
You have?
Sorry.
Just me.
Yep. Okay. All right. Just you and I. All right. I kind of recommend it. But it was a show in the 80s. Gil Gerard
recommend it.
kind of. Gil Gerard plays Buck Rogers. He is a pilot. He is a astronaut from our century, gets frozen for 500 years, shows up on a post-apocalyptic Earth, and has adventures with them. Enterprise feels like a throwback to that series because in it, Buck Rogers is a man out of time. But here's the thing. It's the times that are wrong. Buck Rogers wins in every episode because of his laid-back way of thinking and acting. He doesn't, he's not stuck up with these newfangled ways of thinking in post-apocalyptic Earth. He is the hero of every episode, and you go into this watching he's going to win, and he's going to be right every single time. It is, and that strikes me as Enterprise. Enterprise is really lacking that emotional dimension that we've seen in every version of Star Trek ever.
Well, and Archer's essentially a military brat, right? Who's had a lot of things handed to him. His father worked right alongside Zefram Cochrane. He followed in the footsteps. He's essentially a legacy, right? If you want to call it that. And he's never been challenged before.
Yeah.
And I think that he has this huge chip on his shoulder because of what happened with his dad. And, Archer has severe daddy issues. He is so angry at the Vulcans because they held humanity back long enough and his father died and didn't get to see his, Johnny go out into space. And he's so mad about that. And that kind of personal issue affects everything he does and every interaction he has with the Vulcans, including to Paul, which drives me insane.
It would be interesting if I believe that the writers recognized that and did that on purpose in order to move the character forward and have him realize that. And I think when we first started, I kind of thought maybe that was where it's going. And I think by the end of season 1, it's very clear that is not where it's going. And that the writers don't even seem to understand that that's who Archer is and that's actually not, or maybe they know that that's who he is, but they don't see it as a bad thing.
Well, you brought up, Jamie, that they hired people who weren't Star Trek writers. They hired people who wrote for Melrose Place and other, team-focused dramas. Those shows don't question those. This is his character hook. He's angry about this, so we can write an episode about this where he's angry about this. And they don't consider the larger implications that you might get. Like, to bring up Kirk, the whole thing about his antagonistic attitude towards Klingons comes full circle in the Undiscovered Country, where they're literally, that's the whole point of it, is that, okay, I need to change. I can't let this hatred of Klingons affect the fate of the entire galaxy. But there's no larger consideration of that in Enterprise thus far.
Yeah, I don't know where the story between Archer and the Vulcans is going to go, but where it appears to be going is to the Vulcans realizing they should be nicer to humans, not the other way around. I mean, just in the relationship of Archer and T'Pol is always doing exactly what she's asked to do. And Archer is constantly questioning her loyalty. It's been a whole season. Every time a totally different Vulcan that is unconnected with T'Pol does something he doesn't like, he turns around and blames T'Pol for it, or asks her, did you know about that? Or just gives her a look as though it were her fault. And then we got in that episode with the ambassador, with the Vulcan ambassador, T'Pol says, and I assume, obviously it's coming from the writers because the writers wrote it, but I assume that this is their thesis, is we need to earn the humans' respect, implying that she has not done enough yet to earn their respect, even though she has done so. But how much more is she supposed to do? I don't understand. Just overall, I feel like that is a microcosm of the entire relationship between the humans and the Vulcans. It feels like that's where that whole relationship is going. I feel like it's moving towards the Vulcans need to learn to be better with the humans and trust them more and earn their trust.
Are we in the space now to complain about the Vulcans on this show?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is I do think that, when Charles was on this episode at the midpoint, he talked about Kirk being JFK in space and Archer being George W. Bush in space, which I thought was really a good comparison. And I think a lot, like, if you think of it in that context, and of course of the time, it makes a ton of sense. But yeah, I think that, if you look at the way that they treat, I mean, we can talk about the Vulcans, you can talk about really any aliens and the way that they handle their first contact situations and also any sort of antagonism with other species. It's bizarre. I mean, they choose violence first every time.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I mean, they just fucking wake up and choose violence. That's all they do.
I very much want to hear your Vulcan rant. Very much.
Yeah, tell us about your Vulcan thoughts.
So, okay, beyond the temporal Cold War, which I don't even know if I want to get into, overarching subplot, metaplot of this entire season is that the Vulcans are the bad guys. Like, they hate the Vulcans. Now, the problem is, we as Star Trek fans know who the Vulcans are, and we like them. Like, we know Spock and we know Tuvok. These are our buddies. We know them. We love them. They needed to spend a lot more time on what is wrong with the Vulcans. And the vibe I'm getting from the slight spoilers I'm reading is that this is eventually explained. This is resolved, that these are not the Vulcans that we know.
Correct. Yes. However, you're thinking as if they had this planned out.
Well,
that's
fair enough.
With 20 years of retrospection, these are not the Vulcans that we know. And in season 4, the writers finally listened to all of the fans who were complaining and did something about it. But at this point, when they were writing it, they just didn't know who the Vulcans were because you had a room full of non-Star Trek people.
So watching Strange New Worlds, like they have Spock on this show. And this is a character I know and a character I love. And the actor who is doing this is doing a good job of portraying Spock. And they are taking this character in wildly different directions. And I'm okay with that in a way that I'm not okay with what they're doing with the Vulcans on this show.
Yep. No, I understand.
We say this a lot on this show. This could be really interesting, right? I think that having the humans feel that way about the Vulcans in the context of we know better, like the fans who are watching the show know better, but still understand why the humans would think that. I like that would be really interesting. But what they are doing is actually changing the Vulcans. If it was like, oh, they just don't realize that the Vulcans have their best interests at heart, but for sure the Vulcans have their best interests at heart, that would be an interesting thing to watch. But they basically changed who the Vulcans are, or basically like de-evolved them to a level that is really not logical. No pun intended.
As somebody who has seen a lot less Star Trek than the rest of you guys, and so therefore I think I have a lot less preconceived notions about Vulcans. And to me, like when I'm watching it, the problem is the humans on this show feel like they kind of deserve the bad treatment from the Vulcans. Like the way they act, it does kind of seem like they're not ready for this. And they really need to go, I don't know, take some cultural sensitivity training before they start going around the universe, like meeting other species. And the Vulcans should be really worried about it.
Right.
When I'm watching this, just based on this show, I'm like, I see why the Vulcans feel like the humans should really just stick to their own solar system.
Oh, I agree with you in the meta context of watching the show, Jamie. The show itself has no awareness of the show is 100% on the Enterprise crew side.
Watching the show, you would never believe that humans would be a founding member of the Federation and that they'd all choose to put Federation headquarters on Earth. Right?
Yeah.
That makes no sense based on how this crew is acting and how the rest of the humans are acting. But it also makes complete sense when you see how arrogant they are and you know the humans would insist on that. Well, if you're not putting it on Earth, I'm going to take my ball and go home. That is very human, according to Enterprise.
Well, we brought this up in Shockwave Part 1, where they've apparently accidentally wiped out an entire colony.
Yeah, and the big problem was they thought it was their fault, and once they knew it wasn't their fault, they seemed to just not care anymore.
But Hoshi and Mayweather are talking, and Mayweather's like, from what I'm hearing, people think we're just out here goofing around and causing problems. Like, yeah, you fucking are.
That's because you are. That's literally what you're doing.
I will tell you, when we finally deal with the Vulcan storyline and get that explanation, that I think it's a 3-episode arc is my favorite in all of Enterprise. So you have that to look forward to in 3 more
nice.
seasons.
I feel like we've really been shitting on the show, and I want to say something nice about this show.
I can say nice things about this show.
So my nice thing is that even though it does suck that they put T'Pol in that outfit that she has to wear for this show, I do like that the show has really leaned into putting the men like in their underwear or just like taking their shirts off all of the time. It feels a little weird, to be perfectly honest, but I'm just glad that they're just not always doing that to the women. It does feel a little odd for Star Trek to be doing that, but whatever. Like, I do like that they're just constantly putting them in their underwear. That is very fun.
I agree with you. I think that's a definitely a sort of equal opportunity exploitation sort of a situation.
I mean, it's not quite equal because T'Pol has to wear that outfit in every single scene.
I know, but also, yes, but also she's a fucking queen in that outfit. Like, her in the command chair in that outfit is fucking amazing,
I mean,
right?
It's yet another result of distancing from Star Trek and wanting to emulate Melrose Place. That's what it is.
Y'all, can you imagine Picard and Riker running around in their underpants?
Rubbing some decon gel on each other?
100%.
I'd read that fanfic.
Can I imagine Riker doing that?
No, that was Riker doing
that had to have happened.
Maybe.
Riker absolutely did that.
Okay, fine. No, not Riker. Geordi. It would be the equivalent of Geordi and Picard running around.
I mean, just the amount of times we see them in, like, how many times have we seen Trip in his underwear?
I know that we're talking about Star Trek Enterprise, but are you watching Lower Decks as well? So you've seen Ransom with his decon gel. Okay, I mean, that's Riker with his decon gel. 100%.
Exactly. So talking about kind of these cultural and differences and the xenophobia that plays in, what about the sort of outside of that, the race dynamics in casting and, you know, how the characters of color are treated or not treated or given storylines or not given storylines as the case may be.
Are the ensigns?
Travis does not exist in this show.
So sad that Malcolm gets all of this. Like, they try to actually give us information about Malcolm and we just dislike him more. And then they have an episode that is focused on Travis, and Travis is barely in it, you know?
Yeah, whenever there's a Travis episode, or whenever he really does anything, it's always to further someone else's storyline, usually one of the white men.
I don't feel like any of the human characters on this show, apart from Hoshi, any of the male human characters on this show, feel like they actually belong in the jobs that they are doing. Does Trip Tucker seem like an engineer to you? If you watched anything...
So Charles mentioned that he seems more like a mechanic, and like that feels right to me. Like he seems like a mechanic, not a warp engineer.
Right, okay, but like he does not scream engineer to me. Like he's not like uber geeky about the engines, just like Malcolm is. I know Malcolm is not in charge of security. He's in charge of the armory.
Of all the human men, Travis is the one that actually seems the most experienced.
He is. He grew up on freighters. He has the most space experience.
I disagree that he seems the most. They say that, but he does not seem. He does not feel like
because he's the Wesley Crusher, and they're making him react to things like he's 8 years old. But he should, based on what we've been told, he should be the most confident and the most experienced one on that crew.
But he seems the most naive. He seems like he can describe like, well, you're out here for a long time and stuff. But he seems like he has no actual experience of like...
Yeah, which is so weird because he has so much experience. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Given his background, you would expect, oh, these are the Klingons, my family ran into them, and here's how we dealt with it. And you'd expect that about every alien they encounter.
Right.
Theoretically, because they're going at Warp 5, they're farther out than they've ever been before. Great. But still, Travis has experiences that the rest of them don't.
You might expect him to be more hardened. Like, we don't know who these people are. Let's go to Shields Up. Let's go to Red Alert because we don't know.
Yeah.
Like if they're pumping fluids out of bodies onto the ship.
And then Hoshi is probably the best at her job. She's incredible.
Eventually.
But she has her main story point is that she doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, and one of her other main story points is that she keeps messing up and then like feels bad about it. And she's the only person who ever feels bad when she messes anything
But she's
up.
not
Good point.
necessarily messing up at what her actual job is. She's messing up at other things.
Yeah, like
Right.
it's normal in a job to not always get everything right. She's got a very, very, very hard job. But it's like when Hoshi gets a translation wrong and T'Pol will like needle her about it.
Then you try it. You do it better.
And it's like, well, it's normal for she's trying to learn a language in like an hour.
This is a point I want to bring up. I don't think T'Pol is actually needling her because I've been watching the original series, Star Trek movies. Leonard Nimoy's face is just so open and friendly. Spock is open and curious. And even though he has the upturned eyebrows, anytime you look at Leonard Nimoy's face...
Sorry, Bill, but T'Pol said that Vulcans are not curious.
Well, this is my
I
point.
believe in the pilot.
Logic is an emotion, as we've established. But
Spock wants to be there.
yeah, he may seem implacable, which is what drives McCoy crazy. But the way that they have made up and focused on T'Pol is she has, and this might be my misogyny and the show's misogyny, she has the upturned eyebrows, she has the pouty lips, and she always looks like she's glaring no matter what she says. Like T'Pol has RBF big time. So that anytime she says anything, especially if it's to Hoshi, it seems like a zinger, which she usually reserves just for Trek.
I think that was Jolene's Blaylock's interpretation of emotionless.
Okay.
You know, because not everybody can just be blank, right? And especially if you're talking about the 2000s and women, if you are just blank, that's when you're said to have a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just that we expect women to be emotional, and I think a woman who's not emotional is then an ice queen. And so then we get T'Pol the ice queen. But I actually don't see her as icy at all. To me, she is one of the most emotive characters on the show in terms of like, you can tell when she's upset or uncomfortable, or I just, to me, there is a deepness there. And that's why it's very obvious when she says something and she just maybe says something rude but doesn't mean to, and when she says something and says something rude and she clearly means it, you can tell the difference.
Yeah, I'm just saying, and I know that you all have a different perspective on this. When she's talking to Hoshi in those situations where it seems like she's being catty, she's not. She's being Vulcan.
No, she's absolutely being catty.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what they're trying to do, but I think unfortunately the way that the way they've crafted the dialogue, I agree with you that might be what they're trying to say, is that she is very like just being 100% logical and emotionless, and Hoshi is reacting to that as a human versus a Vulcan. But what is actually ends up happening is the way that they talk to each other feels very catty. It feels very snipey.
Yeah, like Hoshi will be like, I'm going to go start doing this thing. And T'Pol will be like, don't fuck it up like you did last time.
Not what she said. That's completely not.
But basically,
She said, like, don't mess it up like last time.
No, that's what...
It's so rude. It's so rude.
she doesn't show Hoshi the respect that her position, like Hoshi says, let me try to do this thing. And she says, no, we're not going to have time for you to do this. And you're probably not going to get it. Implying you're probably not going to do it right anyway, kind of thing. And that I think is...
T'Pol doesn't do that to Archer. Like with Archer, sometimes she will say something rude and you can tell that it wasn't meant to be that way. But she's never just like so rude to Archer the way she is to Hoshi.
There's a matter of their positions, though, as well.
Fair, yeah.
Because I forget what rank Hoshi is. She's an ensign?
She's an ensign.
Yeah, so she's the lowest level officer on the ship.
And T'Pol is not in Starfleet.
Well, but she's not, but she's essentially the first officer. And she's talking down to Hoshi, she's punching down, essentially. When she's being rude to Archer, she's punching up.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder how she is with Travis. I don't know if we've ever seen them speak
Oh
to
no.
each other.
Okay, let's spend a few minutes talking about T'Pol and Trip, because when she lights into him, I'm just like,
It's my favorite thing.
silly string and party horns. Like, this is my favorite part of the show, is these two kids.
This is a great segue into my next question, which is the relationship between the men and the women in this show, right?
Okay, let's just start off with the best one.
Yeah, I agree. We can start with the very best one, which I agree is T'Pol and Trip. I adore how T'Pol lights into Trip and feels comfortable being so, like, sarcastic and dry and,
I don't know if there's a discussion later of favorite actor on this show, but mine is obviously Colin Turnier as Trip, because every time she just does one of her burns, T'Pol must have 15 mics on her backpack, because everything she says to Trip is just a mic drop.
Yeah.
And his reaction to it is just to stick his tongue in his cheek and just sit there and endure it. And it is amazing.
But yeah, I think I agree. And I think, in the midpoint episode, we talked a lot about this feeling like a very masculine show. I'm not sure that has changed a whole lot. However, I do think that both Hoshi and T'Pol have started to sort of show themselves and sort of stand out as stronger characters on their own. I really, really liked Hoshi going to Ryza and having the best fucking time while everybody else just
Wound up in a cave.
got scammed. And
She quite literally had the best fucking time on Rice.
the best fucking time.
Good for her, all right?
And I liked that the show didn't shame her in any way for that. Like, she did the thing, she had a great time, and good for her. And that was all the show did there, which honestly is surprising, right? It's a little surprising for the show to not, to also make some snarky comment about it.
Okay, but really positive and fantastic, but also kind of not a story. Like, she didn't have
Agreed.
an obstacle she needed to overcome. She didn't have a,
Yeah, they needed to get in her contractual couple of lines for the episode. And
we're gonna have to pay her anyway.
But boy, were those good lines when she's like, "What is this thing? We have nothing like this on Earth. Is it
A strawberry?
Like a strawberry?" And she's holding the strawberry. Oh my god! Probably the greatest scene of the entire.
Okay,
season.
I have a quick fix for that scene. Just hearing you say that right now, JB, is like you just in darkness you hear Toshi say, "What is this thing? It feels like a strawberry, but we don't have anything like this on Earth." Hold on, let me turn on the light. Oh no, it's a strawberry. Okay. Hoshi was done bad, and I really feel like Hoshi has been more appreciated by this series as it's gone on, because in the beginning she was literally someone who's Archer said, "Can you tell this Klingon to shut up?" and Hoshi literally just screams, "Shut up."
I know the second episode when her job was to send a message to the families of the aliens that died on that one ship, and then they come and they're like, "Did you just tell us that you guys murdered them all?"
She's like, no, wait.
How did she screw that one up?
And I feel like the show has done a better job of conveying how difficult her job is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love Hoshi's just like a big nerd, right? She's like a linguistics nerd. And I feel like usually Star Trek has a whole bunch of characters that are very nerdy about things, but for some reason on this ship it's really just Hoshi.
This gets into my bigger discussion of these people don't seem interested in this job, is that nobody's nerdy about their job. Like Geordi and Scotty were both uber nerds about engineering.
if I can talk out of my depth a little bit, I feel like
Please.
That's what I do.
That is what this show is for.
my impression is that this is very much like our own space program in the transition from the Gemini Apollo into the space shuttle program, right? Because Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, they wanted hotshots, right? They wanted test pilots. But when they got to the shuttle program, they actually needed actual scientists up there as well. And
Right.
I feel like it took some time to figure that out and how they should be trained and what was actually necessary. It feels a lot like on Enterprise, they're trying to go for that dynamic, and they're mixing the old guard of Archer, the test pilot, and they're starting to get in some of the scientists, but they're not quite sure how to do it.
Yeah, and again, could be really interesting to see those conflicts happening, because those conflicts obviously happened in real life too, right? With the shuttle program. Those are all those conflicts that were happening when you went for somebody who was like, we're just going to do it and we're going to see what happens and it's going to be great. For, I'm a test pilot. This is what we do. And then you've got these people who were like, okay, but if we want to do this on a long-term basis, we want to have long-term space exploration, you need to have certain science that is in place in order to do that. And you have to follow a set of rules in order to do that. Again, could be super interesting, but they have chosen not to do that. What they have chosen to do is give us 4 frat boys in space.
Well, it feels weird too, because that was a real thing that happened, but in the past of the space program, and this is supposed to be the future of the space program. So why does it go backwards then?
Brandon Braga and Rick Berman.
Yeah.
Here's a question. What was Archer's job before this?
I have no idea, actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
He was hanging out with Trip in Australia, apparently.
He was a pilot, wasn't he?
Or he was in the military in some form.
Was he? I don't know.
These people are absolutely not in the military.
I mean, but they are, though.
Starfleet is not a military organization, quote unquote.
So if we're talking about the men and women in this and their relationships, I think we have to talk about the men, because that's the primary people in the show. So you've got Archer, Trip, Malcolm, and Travis.
I want to talk about Archer and Trip together as a duo.
It's really hard for me because I think that on the one hand, they're very bro-y, very like, I've got your back, I'm going to cover for you. But on the other hand, I like Trip and his himbo energy so much that I feel like Trip tries to make this a very sort of positive masculine relationship, but Archer isn't playing that game. So they're playing two different games to some degree.
I hate that Archer always, whenever he's going down to a planet where he thinks it's going to be like a good time or they're going to have fun or whatever, it's going to be more of like a social thing, he always takes Trip because Trip is his buddy. Even when Trip is like, I don't even want to go, Archer's like, but you're like, come on, it'll be fun or whatever. And I feel like it's so rude to the other people on the ship who, it's denying them opportunities.
Right.
Archer's selection of away teams is a fucking disaster.
Every time.
Well, we're going to this planet that's full of bugs. Should we take an entomologist? No, we're going to take the person who's good at agriculture.
The guy in charge, instead of giving everybody these opportunities and letting everybody have these experiences, he just sees it as him and his buddy hanging out in space.
And Trip gets away with a lot because of his relationship with Archer.
He does. Many years ago, I worked for a tech company, a video game studio, actually. And the CEO, every single day, the CEO would take 3 to 5 people to lunch. And they would talk about the future of the company and the future of the game. And of course, it was always men, right? It was always 3 to 5 men who would go there. And that is what this feels like to me. Because literally they would come back from lunch and be like, okay, new plan, this is what we're doing. And they would make really critical decisions about the work we were doing at these little lunches that nobody else had access to. And that is what the Trip Archer relationship, at its worst, that's what this feels like to me.
Yeah, the one time he brought T'Pol, he did it just because that was when they thought T'Pol was going to be leaving. So he's like, I guess we only have T'Pol for another couple days, so I guess I should bring her. But he wanted to bring Trip.
And it was because he wanted to convince her, because he didn't think she was reacting correctly. He thought she needed to fight more to stay with the Enterprise. And he wanted to convince her.
This is the fundamental problem of this show. If I asked you to describe any Star Trek show in one sentence, you'd be able to do it. the original series, it's like, okay, humanity has they're exploring in a utopian future. Next Gen is like, hey, things are even better now and we're even more powerful. And then DS9 is like, guess what? Things suck. And maybe we have to deal with the messiness. And then Voyager is like, okay, what if Star Trek, but you didn't have Starfleet around you? I don't know what this show is trying to do.
Yeah, and I've been rewatching Voyager, and I feel like there are a lot of things you can compare to Voyager and Enterprise in terms of the things that they're doing, the situations they're in where they don't know, they're really out in the middle of nowhere and they don't know what's going on. But even at its worst, Voyager handled all of that better in a better way, and just had the fucking chain of command. Even though Voyager was dealing with a chain of command that was somewhat broken because of the Maquis, they still handled it better, and they handled that conflict better. But this, as you said, just feels like bros in space.
Yeah, and Trip and Malcolm are the worst duo. That's the thing, is I love Trip, but whenever I don't like him when he's with Archer, and I really don't like him when he's with Malcolm.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Like, Trip is easily influenced by the people he is around. When he's around T'Pol, he's great. When he is around Archer, he's okay, but still not great. And when he's around Malcolm, he's downright nasty. Like, he is, like, hit them on Risa in that. In Night at the Roxbury scene.
Okay.
Oh, God. As bad as this show has treated Hoshi in the first part of the season, the writing for Malcolm in this last part of the season is fucking awful, and I don't think they realize it. And I feel bad for the actor because he's doing the best with what he is being given.
As terrible as Trip is with Malcolm stuck on Risa, when they think they're going to die in that shuttle and he's just telling him to shut the fuck up and do something, that's the best.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed. That was really good. Yeah, when Malcolm is just reading or just dictating the same letter to 50 women, because the show needs to make sure that that we all know that Malcolm is not gay.
Oh, I could talk about that for an hour.
I would really actually like to talk about that for an hour. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely don't understand what they're trying to do with Malcolm. Like, he gives off gay vibes, but then they seem afraid of that, and then they keep insisting that he's straight. But the more they insist he's straight, the more it seems like he's secretly gay.
Right.
Yeah. So the theory / thing that I believe had been in articles at some point was that the intention was originally to have Malcolm come out in later seasons as gay. Like, to have him be a closeted character who then comes out.
Huh. Interesting.
Really? That was their plan?
Well, according to certain sources.
It's definitely what it feels like.
Well, but, oh my God, actor name, Dominic Keating claims that he was never part of any discussion if that was part of a discussion. Like, he says that he didn't know anything about that and didn't think that was true. Other people have said many, many times over the years, including, another name, the writer of Trouble with Tribbles, who also wrote on Next Gen, that guy, has said over the year that it was Rick Berman specifically who did not want gay people on Star Trek. Like, that is almost a direct quote. Rick Berman did not want gay people on Star Trek. So who knows what the real story is?
That seems correct.
But, like, many, many fans over the years have fully accepted, like, Malcolm Reed is gay, even if Dominic Keating has not.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things about
David Gerald.
Thank you. I believe that I've read this. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently there was also, before Enterprise ever came out, there was a rumor that there was going to be a gay character on Enterprise. And so when Enterprise came out and we had Malcolm, people assumed it was going to be Malcolm. And then they decided, no, it's not Malcolm. And then it just felt like they were trying real hard to prove that Malcolm was not gay.
That would explain basically the whole second half of the season. That every time we see Malcolm, he's like talking about some woman he's attracted to, or like some woman that he wants in the future, or some lady in the past that he had some relationship with. Like it's so weird.
And if they have had him come out further along, that would have been great. That would have made so much sense. But obviously they didn't do that.
I don't want my utopian future to have gay people feel like they need to be in the closet. But I also understand it does make sense for 2002 to have some sort of like coming out scene like that. I would forgive it for that.
Absolutely.
If they had done it that way, they could have made it not a societal thing, but more of a family thing, especially because we do get the story that Malcolm's family is super traditional and super military and blah, 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 blah. They could have even given him a line like, look, my family is kind of backwards about some things. Right. And they could have written it away as this is not a society problem anymore. But ultimately, it's a Rick Berman problem because really, Gene Roddenberry had been promising a gay main character since the announcement of Star Trek The Next Generation. He promised it in the 80s at a convention. And it took till Discovery.
Right. Well, yeah. And meanwhile, Alexander Siddig and Andrew Robinson are just like, we're just going to fucking play these guys gay. That's just how we're doing it in Deep Space Nine. Like, I don't even care.
I should say canon gay character.
And now it's canon. Yes. But
my favorite gay people don't exist thing in the show so far is Phlox being in an all straight polycule is so funny.
So good.
Oh, okay.
And so we have not talked about the other two important characters, I believe, on the show, which are Phlox and Porthos.
Phlox, he has had the most development throughout this season. He started off being the weird, creepy Neelix guy who just stands in the background and smiles and has his weird creatures. Like, I think we described him on multiple episodes as a homeopath. He's gone from being the creepy guy who touches other people's food to being someone who actually stands up for ethics on Enterprise. What the fuck is going on here? It's like, no, you can't torture this alien.
He is a doctor.
Is he a doctor?
He's a doctor.
Is he a doctor or is he a vet?
They've described him on multiple occasions as a doctor.
When we first meet him, he's doing surgery.
He's a space vet, is what we consider him.
Veterinarians do surgeries.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, like, I'm that's not a knock on him. Like, vets have a really hard job because you have to be able to understand all these different species, which is what he has to do, right?
That's the interesting thing, because in England, surgeons are not called doctor.
Oh.
The doctor is a GP or an internist. So, yeah.
We're not in England, man. This is an American show, as we've already established.
We're in space. We're in American
space.
Well, then we do see Dr. Crusher treating Spot in sickbay.
That's true. And Phlox has treated Porthos already. We know that. He ate too much cheese.
Archer's a terrible dog dad. Makes me mad.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry.
No, I like the portrayal of Phlox a lot, and I especially like the Billingsley portrayal of Phlox when they woke him up from hibernation and he was a completely fucking manic lunatic.
I loved that.
That was amazing. As much as I enjoy Michael Burnham on drugs, just like laughing as explosions are going off on her.
This is so good.
Billingsley, like Phlox, is like, hey, what's going on? Where's the patient? Call the doctor. You're the doctor. Oh, yes, I am.
Oh, but in my opinion, the best thing about Phlox is that he is able to critique humanity without sounding as like snarky as T'Pol does.
Yeah,
agreed.
Yeah, because he has had cultural sensitivity training, unlike everybody else on the Enterprise. Whenever he's talking about any kind of other species, he's so open to it. If they're like have weird things that they do, he gets excited about it instead of just like being like, "Oh, that's like so weird," like all the other humans on this ship do.
And he does that to T'Pol too. T'Pol's like, we wiped out a colony of 3,000 people. I can't believe that the captain is taking this personally. He's like, yo, slow your roll. He thinks he killed 3,000 people. Maybe he should be reacting to this emotionally.
Right. Like maybe emotional is normal for humans, just not for you.
Here's my thing, is that T'Pol and Phlox, especially Phlox, all the humans on the show are children, and those two are the adults in the room.
Wait, so you're saying Phlox is the fun dad?
Phlox is the fun dad. He's like, ask your mother if you can do that. And T'Pol's like, no.
He's making all the dad jokes.
100%.
That
yes.
actually works really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Even when they're like, our mission is being shut down, and Phlox is like, well, there's always another nebula to explore.
He's just like, he's so excited to learn about other cultures and like take part in it in a respectful way, in a way that like the rest of this crew, like, I just go back to that one episode when, actually, I guess there were multiple episodes when Archer and Trip, when T'Pol's like telling them how to act when they go meet the Vulcan monks, and they're just like scoffing at it and being so rude, like, and I just can't imagine, like, if you're visiting, like, I don't know, you're like on a vacation and you're visiting like a church and someone's like, hey, this is how you should act when you go in here. And even though like I'm not Christian and I'm not super familiar with Christianity, like I'm still going to be respectful, right? And like Phlox is somebody who would also be respectful.
You wouldn't see the monks and scream, nice dress!
Like Trip and Archer and Malcolm, the fact that it's their whole job is to go out here and meet other alien species, they're just very, very bad about it.
And again, just coming back to this idea of there is no point where they are told they are wrong. Think about the episode Fallen Hero, where T'Pol is like, okay, here's what you have to do with this ambassador. Don't shake her hand. Don't look, do not make eye contact, whatever it is. Like, don't talk to her, just be. And then she shows up and she's like, let me shake your hand. And T'Pol was wrong, right? Again, T'Pol was overreacting and making a big, and so they were in the right. Again, them being them was the right call.
Yeah. The look that Archer gave to Paul when like when the ambassador put her hand out to shake and Archer raised his eyebrows at T'Pol, like clearly implying like you were wrong about this, when it's like, actually, no, like T'Pol was right to be like, this is what is generally expected of somebody in her position. And then it makes sense that the ambassador, actually, because she's an ambassador, would be very good at interacting and, have done her research on humans and
she did
adapted.
her research and was practicing her empathy, which Archer doesn't have.
And it doesn't mean T'Pol was wrong.
It doesn't mean she was
But he's
wrong.
so
It
rude
100% does not mean she was wrong. But the show is telling us she was wrong. That you should never question what Archer does.
Show. It goes back to Sue earlier, like you talked about intentions. And I think that's the thing that bothers me so much is it feels like the writers of this show are on the side of Archer when Trip is making a joke about going down to the matriarchal planet and joking about flirting with them. It seems like the writers are like, yeah, that would be so funny. This is like what we would say to each other if we were going down there.
I am infuriated by the fact that they talk about this matriarchal planet and then kill everybody before we even get down there. I'm so mad about that. Like, come on, man. You can't even give us, like, a taste of that, because they were like, well, that's just crazy. We gotta talk about that. That's a thing, but then we're never actually going to show it.
Maria, the fact that it was completely wiped out is unimportant because it wasn't Enterprise's fault. Big picture.
So I saw this. I swear there's a point to this little story I'm about to tell. I saw this video the other day posted by a family vlogger. I'm so sorry. Family vloggers are the worst.
No, I'm sorry. Is that the premise of Enterprise? I promise that there is a point to this story I'm about to tell.
Yes. So the family vlogger in London, and it's like the morning commute or something, and this person is letting all of their children just randomly go on the escalator, walk slowly, stand all over it. And then you see commuters, again, in the city of London, like being annoyed and walking around the children because they're standing on the wrong side of the escalator. And the text over this video is like, are all Londoners this rude, or is this just our experience? And of course it was...
Are you fucking kidding me?
Motherfucker, I gotta get to work.
No, of course it was stitched by a creator. This is why I saw it, why I wound up on my page. That was like, you're the ones being rude. right? You family who did this and let your children behave this way are the ones being rude. Archer is that family.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're just going to do whatever they want and expect the rest of the universe to accommodate them. And if there's any kind of headbutting because of it, he's going to play the victim.
We've talked about this before, that part of the constraint that Rick Berman felt with Next Generation was Gene Roddenberry's no crew complex. So when he got into DS9 and Voyager, they got away from that. And going into Enterprise, it definitely feels like that sort of retrograde in a respect. It was like the captain is always right,
No matter what.
and whatever Archer decides is the morally correct decision. That just at this instant just struck me as a decision of like nobody's like, you know, Janeway is gonna have to make morally suspect decisions. Avery Brooks's character, sorry, it's evaded my head. Cisco, like those are gonna be. What if Star Trek wasn't perfect and now it's like he's given all this power and it's like no, the white guy in charge is absolutely completely perfect, and whatever he decides is correct. That's a really fucking weird swerve to take. Seriously.
Yeah. So I don't know this for sure. My speculation with that sort of change in tone is that this is our first post 9/11 Star Trek.
Mm.
And they're through the entire series is very much a like we're all in this together, follow the leader kind of vibe that I think
George W. Bush in space.
Yeah, George W. Bush in space. And they didn't want to in the way that like Next Gen and DS9 would bring up a conflict or a question and not necessarily give you the answer. Enterprise wanted to give you the answer. They didn't want to leave any ambiguity into where their character stood.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that they really needed to feel like somebody knew what was going on. The problem was that Archer clearly didn't know what he was doing. Like, he's clearly fucking up and being a dick about it and suffering no consequences from that. And that is extremely frustrating, which, you know, sort of plays out the way 9/11 played out, to be fair.
When we have an episode like Desert Crossing, where they're essentially trying to solve peace in the Middle East, because it's a complex, nuanced issue that doesn't have necessarily like one person in the right or wrong, they basically just peace out. Like Archer's like, this seems complicated, we're gonna leave, because he's written in such a way where unless there is like a good guy and a bad guy, he like can't actually seem to deal with it at all.
I don't necessarily hate that, though. I feel like it's actually unusual for Archer to say, I'm not getting involved here, as opposed to saying, I think this is what's right and wrong, and I'm going to impose my morals on everybody else. However, I think that it was extraordinarily heavy-handed the way they handled it, but it also like makes for a terrible story. Yeah. There's no conclusion. They just leave and those guys are still doing their thing and we're just gonna go
it means we don't get stories that have nuance,
exactly,
where the characters have to like make decisions that maybe there's no good decision. I mean, I guess we got that in Dear Doctor, and that might be why that was one of the best episodes of the show, which it was also early enough on that was probably a pre 9/11 episode, at least written pre 9/11.
My major failing with this show is the show running and the writing. I have nothing but love for the actors. No, the actors are doing a great job.
Stories and the characters.
No. Whatever I don't like about this show comes from the top. Like, the actors are doing a good job.
They're doing everything they can with the material that they have.
The designers, like everything, the design of this show, the look of the show is great. It's that the show running is unfocused. Like,
it's one word for it.
That's where all of the problems with this show come from.
I do wish the show were less drab looking. when I was trying to make the uniform, I realized I had no idea what color what color blue their uniforms were, because we never see them in the light. It's so like dark and drab, all of it. Like this show I don't know, it needs some bright colors.
The whole look of this show is like they're on a submarine, like they're a military organization. And
I get that. And I do mostly like it, but
allow me to suggest this would be a better show if they were a super military organization and they were thrust into situations where a military solution didn't work. That would be a better first season of Star Trek Enterprise.
I agree. And I think that Jamie, what you're saying there is like why we get so excited when they wear anything other than their uniforms. We're like, oh, they're in desert gear. This is so cool. Or they're in casual wear. This is so cool. I also will say, just talking about costuming in general, I generally like the way that they have the way that they do put their characters in casual clothes more often. I love casual Star Trek, and in the previous episodes, I feel like we didn't see it all that much. I guess we did in Deep Space Nine a little bit, but
I love the attention to detail on all the costuming on this show.
for sure.
The fact that when they go down to planets, they have like hot weather gear and cold weather gear and rain gear, which it makes sense that like in the future, presumably, like my assumption was always that they have like magic future textiles that like
That
keep them warm in the cold and keep them cool in the heat. But it makes sense if this show that's set in the past that they would not necessarily have those magic textiles. So they would need like different outfits. And I do love that. I love that they've like designed all these different outfits for the crew to wear. I know I've talked at length about the undershirts and the fact that when they're turned over that you don't see a seam underneath, which is cool. There's just a lot of detail in the costume.
And I think in general, the creation of the show and the detail of the show, the food, the costumes, the cinematography, the way it's filmed, it's beautiful. Like, I think it's very well, all of that is very well done. I think the technical side of the show is great, including the actors, right?
So I actually want to talk about food very briefly. I love the way food is used on this show. It's some of the most food on a show that is not a show about food. Like, people are constantly eating. And I think it was in, Bill, one of those old blog posts by Chef Dorothy's husband, where he said something about how this show uses food the way Next Generation use turbolifts.
Oh, interesting. So that's where you have conversations and move the plot
On Next
forward.
Generation, yeah, turbolifts were the place where random crew members would come together and be forced together to have a conversation. And this crew does it in the mess hall. So it's like two random characters happen to be in the mess hall and sit down and have a conversation. I just think it's very fun. It's fun to see people eating, which is, I feel like, is just unusual on TV.
And
general.
I think that I think the mess hall is a part of that. And then also the fact that, like, T'Pol and Trip and Archer sitting, so many episodes sort of start with them having dinner in his cabin or whatever, and sort of mapping out what's going to happen.
They're having dinner together every night.
Yeah.
And it seems more realistic to me in that, like, if you're living on a ship, you're eating all the time. Like, you do have to eat all of your meals with your coworkers, pretty much.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so Sue, I have two questions for you, but the first is kind of what kind of context can you give us in terms of what was going on in Star Trek fandom and in the, world of Star Trek in general that gave us fucking Enterprise? Gave us this goddamn show. What was going on? Because I cannot tell you the number of times that Bill on this show has said, I don't understand what the show is about.
Neither did we.
What is the show trying to tell us?
Like, what are they trying to do?
God. So fandom was not like there was alt Star Trek creative. There was the Trek BBS, but there wasn't there was no social media, right? So that kind of fan reaction that we see now, we didn't see then, right? There's mostly discussion boards and that sort of thing, which honestly, because of the situation I was in, not having any television, I was not really partaking in the Trek BBS at the time. But my understanding from the production side of things is that the studio wanted another Star Trek. Initially they wanted it to start while Voyager was still running. But because Berman was actually involved in Voyager, he didn't want to do that to that show. Meanwhile, he had no problem starting up Voyager while DS9 was still running and leaving Ira Steven Behr in charge of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, didn't they do that previously?
Yeah, he's a word I'm not going to say on a podcast. And that they also wanted him to go, they wanted them to take the show further into the future. They wanted to go into, I believe, the 26th century. And Berman was hesitant about creating even farther future tech. And so he said, well, I want to wait until Voyager ends and I want to go back in time. And I think, this is my speculation, I have not read this anywhere. My speculation is that they also thought that taking the show back in time would mean that they didn't have to pay as much attention to things like diversity and inclusion, even though they were still making it in 2000. Because really, they took the racial makeup of the original series and just replicated that, and they switched the comm officer and the navigator, and they made all the white people American.
But Sue, almost a third of the Enterprise are women.
Yeah.
Almost a third! Incredible!
Almost
1/3.
Yay!
They are so proud of that.
Of 84 people or something?
Utopia.
There's a quote I like to reference from Rick Berman. I don't like to reference it, but I do. Like, you know what I mean. Just like anything with Rick Berman. And it's actually about the creation of Voyager, not the creation of Enterprise. But if you thought this way about the creation of Voyager, imagine how much it got 7 years later. He said, it had been a while since we had a young, attractive white guy on the show. It just turned out...
Jesus fucking Christ!
Oh, it gets better. It just turned out that most of the characters were either alien or black in the previous show, and here we had a woman in a major role. So that's why they created Tom Paris.
Amazing.
Because there were too many women, aliens, and black people.
Are you just like, okay, this is my 2024, 2025 brain, I know. But Jesus fucking Christ, who says that out loud?
Right. Well, and then they created Voyager, which had a main cast that was practically half women. So, you know, those like terrible Rick Berman feelings probably got even more intensified by the time they got to Enterprise.
I have two distinct feelings about this. One is I understand that is incredibly offensive to everybody else. Two, to me, Tom Paris is supposed to be my fucking avatar on this show? Fuck you!
I was wondering where you were going with that, Bill.
Sorry, that's what you get. Welcome to our world.
But like also like extrapolate that back to DS9. He's also saying, Kalmini, you aren't young or attractive. And Sid, you're black, I guess?
Oh.
Like, I have complex feelings about DS9. Like, I don't like Dark Trek, as we've talked about. But that was the whole fucking point of DS9, was like, we have the neoliberal utopia of TNG. It was like, oh no, we're going to tell darker stories now. And so I completely understand that those are valuable stories. And there's a lot of DS9 that think is fantastic storytelling. And then Voyager is like, okay, but what if you didn't have all the reasons? Like, but to go back to and create Enterprise, because like, yeah, fuck that. We're going back to what's really great. And here it is. It's Enterprise.
Yeah.
Like, I don't...
Penises and white ones.
And this gets into the thing. It's like my larger problem with Enterprise is that they're jettisoning the ethical complexity that was in the original series. That was the whole fucking point of the original series. It was like, yeah, we could do this, but should we do this?
They do not do nuance well.
No.
Not at all. So here's the thing that you made me think of, Stu, when you were talking about what they wanted for Enterprise, but Rick Berman didn't. is Discovery what they wanted for Enterprise? Because that is sort of like what it ended up being, right? It was like, what were things like way back when? Not as far back as Enterprise, but in the past. How did things go when we didn't have all of the structure that we had? And then let's jump way forward into the future, right? And that feels like what Discovery did. Also, I really want to know what happened to all of the diversity between Discovery and the original series, because there were a whole lot more brown people.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, casting wise, even all the aliens they meet are almost entirely white men. We saw there was one episode that had some of the aliens were black men, and it appeared to just be like that was a black man race, like,
Right.
and I don't believe they had any lines. We get a couple women, but only when they're like important for the story because someone needs a love interest or a mother.
And then they do that bullshit with Voxola where they have a black female engineer who is fucking Angelica Schuyler.
Yeah, Renee Elise Goldsberry.
Yeah, she had to peace out.
And they just leave her. She shows up and she fucking is unconscious for the entire episode.
She has 2 lines which she slays, and then she falls unconscious, and they leave her unconscious and periodically show her unconscious body for the rest of the episode. And we never even get another line from
Even
her.
though that is literally makes no sense in the context of the story, because the guy who was hit after, like before her, is conscious, but she's not. It's stupid shit like that isn't necessary that drives me crazy.
Do you want a supercut of Angelica Schuyler talking about the rules of water polo? Captain! The Texas guard can't protect his right-hand side! She had to peace out because she had to go do a audition for Lin-Manuel Miranda.
For Hamilton, yeah, fair enough. Like, she was like, I got better places to be.
I'm more interested in a discussion of what went wrong on this show. Like, why didn't it work? Especially after coming off of DS9, they told the story, what happens if Starfleet has to go to war? Voyager is a kookier, like, as Lower Decks has taught us, this fucking wild show about cheese and macrobiotics and stuff like that. And then they go into this new series, and it's just completely inept. It's like, again, I've described it as, this feels like a former Soviet republic decided to create a Star Trek show.
Yep.
And this is what came out. It has no DNA with the rest of the series.
Right.
in the oral history book that I think Jamie has referenced before, they actually do talk quite a bit about why they think the show didn't take off.
I haven't actually read the book because I was worried that there would be spoilers.
Yeah, there will be.
I've only read a couple pages, and then like randomly some other pages I just happened to see things.
Maybe we need to give that book to Steven and let him like give us little bits of information from there.
I kind of love that idea actually.
There's no like single reason, of course, but like so they blame the theme song a little bit. They blame lots of stuff a little bit. I think it boils down to nobody really wanted to be there. Like, even Rick Berman was like, I didn't want to do another Star Trek show.
I hate that.
I mean, the actors wanted to be there.
Well, yes, but like nobody in production really wanted to be doing a Star Trek show, wanted to be writing a Star Trek show. And
that makes sense,
it just
but
seems like this might sound, I don't know, wishy-washy or something, but the love of it wasn't there.
No, I think you're right. I think that Star Trek fans love Star Trek. And if you have people who do not know Star Trek writing this show, that's going to be a problem. Sue, you mentioned this a second ago, and it's absolutely something I want to talk to you about. What are your thoughts on this Diane Warren theme song?
Here we go.
This show.
I believe my very first reaction to it was, wait, am I watching Star Trek? Did I download the right show?
Yeah.
Like now, I love it in a way you love bad things, but I still skip it whenever I have the chance if I have to be watching Enterprise.
Well, then, in Jamie's opinion, you are a cheater.
No, because she doesn't have a podcast about Star Trek.
Yes, I do.
Sorry. You do have a podcast about Star Trek. You do not have a podcast about Enterprise.
I'm sorry. Do you watch the complete credits for every episode of every Star Trek show you watch? If not, then you are a cheater.
Yes.
It doesn't change. It doesn't get better.
If you have a podcast about Star Trek Enterprise and you're watching the episode for the show, you should have to sit through the whole theme song.
We know that's your theory. We do not agree with it. I think we've established this.
There are, though, you haven't gotten there yet, but there are some episodes that you don't want to skip the intro for because it does change.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Yes.
Shit.
There's a change for some specific episodes, and then there is a change. They re-record the theme song, I believe in season 3, because they think it'll make it better.
I know it. I know at some point they have like a new production of the song, but I didn't know that they had like one-off episodes that they did interesting things for.
Not many. It might be 1 or 2, but it does change.
That'll be fun.
Okay, so we have finished season 1. It's been
a long road.
It's been a year that we've been doing this, which is amazing. It has been a long road.
I did not think we would make it to a year.
I did not. I 100% would.
I cannot believe we are still recording this.
Never
podcast.
would have thought we'd have made it through.
I can't believe anybody's listening to it.
Also true. This is primarily for Jamie and Bill. What are you hoping for? Like, are there storylines or characters or topics that you'd like to see covered in the next season?
T'Pol's architect fiance.
I want to know so much about him.
I want to see it. I want to know what's going on there. Is that why she's on the internet? Like, because to me, in my head, he is just awful and she really doesn't want to marry him. And that's why she is just putting up with everybody on the Enterprise, because she's like, at least this is better than that.
I would like to just either never talk about the temporal Cold War again, or just like get it resolved in one episode. Like, I just want it to go away.
Yeah.
Because it's such a weird choice, because we've seen almost nothing about it. We've seen like 3 episodes that reference it, including the finale.
We still don't even know what we established that all of us have different ideas of what the words temporal Cold War even mean. Like, we don't even know what it means.
Absolutely. It's so weird. So that's my hope, is to just get some sort of resolution on that. Bill, what do you think?
I would just like this show to be more fun. I would like to enjoy watching this show.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
It just feels like I enjoy complaining to you two about this show.
And it does fun well. Like, when they are trying to be fun, it usually is pretty fun, even if there's maybe some issues with it.
I would like this show on a storytelling level to figure itself out, because as you explained, the UPN was launching a new network. It's like, no, we're going to throw however much money at you to make you make this show, whether it's good or not. And I looked at the history of the UPN network, and it was just throwing spaghetti at the wall. It was just like, we're going to have a show for this audience, and a show for this audience, and a show for this audience. It's like, we're literally going to create every show in the entire world. And it's like, oh, we have a Star Trek license. Let's create a Star Trek show. I would like this show to have an identity.
Right.
Maria, what about you?
Well, I mean, I want the temporal Cold War to get resolved. I just like to see a few more characters fleshed out. I'd like to see a little more about Travis, but I'd also just like to see some of the other character, like the other crew. Like, we've seen Cutler, and we've seen that one guy who just screamed a lot because he was in the cocaine cave, and
go to hell.
We saw Renee Lee Scoldsberry, who I think we've confirmed is not coming back, but that's too bad.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see her again.
No, maybe they'll bring back that white guy that was with her that for some reason got to wake up from being unconscious and talk about water polo with them.
Yeah. I would like to see less water polo content.
Yeah.
Why do you hate water polo?
I would like more Porthos, less water polo.
What if Beagle's playing water polo?
Yeah, that I'm in for. 100%. All in. Beagles playing water polo, I would be all over. Basically, I would like this show to just be about Porthos. That is what it comes down to.
I know we already did Charles's Two Truths and a Lie, but I just want to say that during that episode, he told us that we had a forthcoming episode that was going to be Porthos focused that was coming soon.
It's coming soon.
And we watched the whole rest of the season and there was no Porthos focused episode. I think that was the lie.
No, it's not a lie. It's in the first half of season 2. I know exactly what he's talking about.
So coming soon just meant maybe not as soon as we wanted. Yeah, Sue, he told us that. And then the following episode we did was the one called Sleeping Dogs. And I was like, clearly this is a Porthos episode. And Porthos doesn't show up one time in that episode. Nope. And it was over halfway through the episode before I realized it was not a Porthos episode. I was so sure going in.
This is from the person who was looking for the sex scandal for 7 seasons.
Yeah.
Well,
oh my God.
You missed my supposition that because one of the things about the show, they invent everything for the first time, is that Captain's Log was a derivation of Captain's Dog.
Really? I think my favorite thing is when he's like recording logs and like pauses them to talk to Porthos.
Oh my God.
It's so stupid. I love it.
Yeah, I love that.
Nobody can type. Nobody types in this fucking show.
Well, no, on all Star Trek, they usually don't. They always say all their things out loud.
I would like to like Malcolm. I would like to like him even a little bit. I would like him to be even vaguely likable. Or I would like him to be the bad guy. Like, I don't like this, like, he's just kind of a douchebag who's on this ship.
You've just described 60% of the command crew of Star Trek Enterprise.
You know how every job there's that one person that you can't stand, but you're like, I still have to be nice to them because I work with them, but you can't stand them. Like Malcolm is that person on the Enterprise.
So there is. This is the minorest of spoilers. There's an upcoming episode where Archer invites Malcolm to have dinner with him, or I think it's breakfast. Have breakfast with him to get to know him better. In which we find out that Malcolm does not like water polo or any other sports.
I like the or any other sports because he's
so nothing. He's nothing.
His whole personality is nothing. Yeah, like
he likes pineapple. That's all we know about him.
Like I like the first Malcolm Focus episode was like, we learned that he has no friends and nobody knows anything about him. And then when you try to learn something, you just learn that there is nothing to learn.
He is the whitest of
like
white
it's
men.
not, he just doesn't really like food he likes food. He just doesn't really have opinions. Maybe he kind of likes pineapple. And otherwise, like he likes women, apparently.
Quote unquote.
And that's about it.
All right, JB, how about you? What sort of one sentence on what your hopes and dreams are for season 2.
Okay, there's a lot of things I hate about this show. I feel like we just spent the last like 2 hours complaining about the show, but I do feel like it's got a lot going for it. And it's got a lot of potential. I know we've heard that it does get better, and I'm excited to see it get better because I do like a lot of these characters. Like when we recorded the midpoint episode, one of the things I said was that I don't like the characters. Like I pretty much don't like anyone. And I think that that's changed, and a lot of them have been growing on me. I really like Trip. I really like Phlox. I really like Hoshi. That's about it. Like Travis, I just don't know anything about.
T'Pol.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I love T'Pol. I do feel like the second half of the first season was better than the first half. So I want it to get better. I want it to be good.
I want to add something to what Jamie, I hope the writing gets better. I think all the elements of this show are there. Mm-hmm. If the writing gets better, this will be a good show.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think that the show has potential. I'm starting to like some of the characters. I hope they just, I don't know, figure their shit out, man. Like, just like figure out what you're doing.
I mean, the main thing I want is for it to stop feeling like so masculine, but I know that it's going to stay that way. Like the one thing I know is that that's not going to change. And so if that's not going to change, I at least want it to be fun.
And interesting stories. Like at least give us interesting stories.
I would not even describe it as masculine. I would describe it as startup.
Well, toxic masculine.
Yeah, I think like a startup culture is a masculine culture. Like to me, those are kind of one and the same. A specific type of it's like a tech bro masculinity.
Okay, so now it's time for a very special Two Truths and a Lie that Sue will be providing us. Sue, please give us 2 truths and a lie about what is coming in the first half of season 2 of Enterprise, which is not yet Star Trek Enterprise. Just Enterprise.
All right, here we go. The crew ends up in a tense diplomatic situation because Malcolm forgets his communicator during an away mission. The crew ends up in a tense diplomatic situation because Hoshi gets sick from the food during an away mission.
Okay.
The crew ends up in a tense diplomatic situation because Porthos pees on a tree during an away mission.
Aw. I'm going to go with Hoshi getting sick. Even though I feel like that's probably wrong, I just like really, really want the Porthos one to be true. And I definitely believe that Malcolm would just like mess up his job.
Yeah, for that reason, for exactly that reason, I'm going to go with Malcolm forgets his communicator. I'm going to go with A.
You think that one's the lie?
That's the lie. That's what I'm.
Yes.
I don't know. It calls to me. I'm going to deal with that one.
Yeah, I'm actually with Bill on this one. I think that Malcolm is too technical and careful to forget his communicator. So I think I'm going to go with that one.
He does work with a lot of explosives, and you do have to have a lot of attention to detail.
The idea that Malcolm creates a problem because he forgets a communicator. That's a weird situation for him to be in.
I just don't like Malcolm. I don't believe any negative thing about him.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Jamie. You don't like the closeted gay man? I'm sorry. Maybe you need to check yourself because he's dealing with his shit.
That was excellent.
Okay, well, we will see which one of those 3 things is true, but that is the episode. Thanks for listening and hanging out with us for a whole season. Next episode, Jamie is going to be watching the first episode of season 2, Shockwave Part 2, which will presumably resolve the cliffhanger at the end of season 1, but with this show, who the fuck knows? We'll see.
They all died, and now it's a new crew. Remember that other crew?
Oh my god, wouldn't that be
the people who
amazing?
are actually the best at their jobs.
Sue, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insights and thoughts about the show. Please tell us where people can find you.
Yeah, the best place to find me is over at womenatwarp.com. I don't really do socials much anymore because they're all trash fires. But if you like looking at pictures of cats, I suppose you could follow my cat Instagram. They're at noodlebeanpotato.
Excellent. I will definitely be doing that because the only Instagrams I follow are cats or dogs. Okay, special thanks to K.O. Myers at Particulate Media for the sound assistance, to our friend David for the beautiful cover art, and to John Stephen King for being the voice of our computer and giving us presents even though the nacelles fall off.
No, that's series accurate.
If you liked our show, please rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app of choice and tell your friends about us. We really appreciate it. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as Enterprise Splaining and on Blue Sky as Enterprise Splain. You can also email us any comments or questions such as, wait, how many seasons did this show run for? To enterprisesplaining@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, and we really appreciate all of the people who have actually emailed us or commented on our Facebook. It's been great. We really did not expect this many people to actually listen to our show.
We also would have gone over questions from listeners, but no one sent us questions like they did the first time. I mean, we didn't specifically say, but yeah, if you send us questions, we might answer them on a future episode.
If we know the answers, we will try to answer them.
And if you don't, just make them up.
Yeah, that's on brand. If you want to support this podcast, you can find us at Buy Me a Coffee as Enterprise Splaining. And we will see you in 2 weeks with a whole new goddamn season of this show. Bye!
Computer. End program.
penises and white ones.
I'm sorry, I just saw a giant cat eyeball staring.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.